From WRAL News, this is Focal Point.
In 1991, the governor said this could be an economic boon to eastern North Carolina.
We have a project here that could bring to our state about 56,000 new jobs.
But after 14 years and more than $140 million, the Global Transpark has yet to create a single manufacturing job.
There's really no positive net economic impact for the state. None.
Is North Carolina's Global Transpark a boon or a boondoggle?
I think it was oversold.
Some say it'll never fly.
It will never be a global transpark that they sold us.
Others say it's too soon to pronounce the GTP DOA.
I think it's going to work. We've got to keep the faith.
But are these signs of faith or futility? In 1991, state leaders had a vision: combine manufacturing with air transportation at a massive industrial complex that would transform eastern North Carolina's struggling economy. Our focal point tonight, the Global Transpark. 14 years after it was launched, the GTP just announced its first manufacturing tenant. And much like the GTP itself, the announcement comes amid controversy and uncertainty. More on that later. First, a look at a sky-high vision that some say was pie in the sky.
Hey, Jim. How you doing today?
At Connie's in Kinston, they chew the food.
You know how we sit around a table every morning and set everything straight?
And the fact.
We need better education, better school systems.
Here opinions flow like sweet tea. Talk of the area's economy is a touch of lemon.
We don't have any young people staying in eastern North Carolina.
We've got to have some industry in this area.
If we can just find a way to get businesses to come here.
The Global Transpark was supposed to do just that.
That's fine.
It was John Casarda's idea. He's director of the Keenan Institute of Private Enterprise. Casarda believed that air transportation would drive the economy just like rivers, rail, and roads have.
We wanted to position North Carolina as a key node in air commerce in the 21st century.
Casarda saw manufacturing plants lining massive airport runways. Parts and supplies could be flown in, assembled into finished products, which would be flown out. Companies could serve their customers faster and cut transportation and inventory costs.
Here's Dr. Jack Casarda.
Casarda sold Republican Governor Jim Martin on the idea in 1990.
I believe the global air cargo industrial complex can have the kind of impact for North Carolina that Research Triangle Park had, and more, and I know that's saying a lot.
Governor Martin pitched the Transpark concept to the General Assembly in his 1991 State of the State address and ordered a study of the idea. Within months, the Democrat-controlled General Assembly established the North Carolina Air Cargo Airport Authority, which named Governor Martin as its chairman.
Very exciting.
The following year, the authority selected a site for the project.
I would move that the North Carolina Air Cargo Airport Authority select the proposal of the Kinston Jetport as the preferred site for the Global Transpark.
Planning for the Transpark began.
Eastern North Carolina.
In 1993, Governor Jim Hunt took over chairmanship of what became the Global Transpark Authority.
I supported the Global Transpark because I thought there was a good chance it would work and provide lots of jobs for our people and help the area of that whole eastern North Carolina area, the area that's sort of been left behind.
The GTP Authority was the state agency created to manage the Transpark. The GTP Foundation was a nonprofit created to raise private money for GTP development. And the GTP Commission was created to promote economic development in the 13-county region around the GTP, using funds from a $5 license tag fee. The region was dubbed the Global Transpark Development Zone.
Some Transpark companies will locate adjacent to taxiways, where air freighters will dock for incoming and outgoing goods and materials.
A 1994 marketing video portrayed the futuristic complex to come.
At the central cargo facility, the automated tracking system will interface with suppliers and customers' data systems.
GTP supporters said the project could create more than 50,000 jobs and pump nearly $3 billion a year into the region's economy by 1998.
I think those predictions were inflated and exaggerated and probably weren't very wise for the long-term health of the project to make those kinds of estimates.
That's because the predictions haven't come true.
The greater tax part.
I don't see where all the money's gone to. You can see some of it, but you can't see all of it. I don't understand where it all went.
I don't think we've seen many results for the money that was put into it.
Next, the money, the results, and the critics of both.
It's a giant boondoggle.
You're watching Focal Point from WRAL News. In-depth coverage you can count on.
Its critics have come up with some creative names for the Global Transpark. The Global Transport, the Greater Tax Park, even some names you can't say on TV. They say it's time to pull the plug on a project that has fallen well short of expectations.
Here we go.
Don Carrington is vice president of the John Locke Foundation. It's a conservative advocacy group that's often critical of government spending and has targeted the Transpark for more than a decade. Carrington worked for the State Employment Security Commission when Governor Martin first proposed the GTP.
And at the time, I concluded that they were just making stuff up.
The study Governor Martin ordered in 1991 said the overall concept was technically feasible, but it did not determine the overall feasibility of the actual project. It also said prospective tenants of the complex were not identified.
This project went forward without a real feasibility or cost-benefit analysis.
The legislature approved $6 million for GTP planning before that first study of the concept was even finished. Carrington suspects that the Martin administration pushed the project to provide a legacy for the outgoing governor.
A major project helping out North Carolina, or more particularly eastern North Carolina, would be good for his reputation.
Martin, who is chairman of the GTP Foundation, declined our invitation to be interviewed for this program. But Carrington says his vision was viable as a business model. After all, air freight by weight has more than tripled since 1990. So why hasn't the Global Transpark taken off?
Once the politicians got their hands on it, then all sense of reason goes out the window.
Critics say the politicians chose a site that needed the GTP instead of a site that met the GTP's needs.
To a large extent, it was a political decision as much as a economic decision.
There was political pressure to bring prosperity to eastern North Carolina, but the Kinston site had limitations. It's almost 50 miles from the nearest interstate. It's also environmentally sensitive.
As I tell people, all of eastern North Carolina is one great big wetland.
Environmental permitting delayed the project for years. Kinston also lacks many of the recreational and cultural amenities companies look for.
You can't just go out into a rural area and say, we're going to make another RTP right here.
Critics say politics also tainted the management of the GTP authority itself. A 1996 newspaper expose revealed a bloated bureaucracy of political appointees spending too much money on travel and entertainment.
We had some people on the payroll who weren't earning their keep. We were spending too much and getting too little.
Despite reforms, critics say the state continued to spend too much and get too little out of the Transpark.
Yep, what's their number, 710?
Stephen LaRoque, a small business owner and legislator from Kinston, says the project needs new leadership.
We need business people involved in the Transpark at the leadership level. People that understand business, understand economic development.
And LaRoque says Governor Easley needs to do more.
He's the chairman of the Global Transpark Authority Board, and he never shows up.
Easley's press office declined our repeated request for an interview with the governor about the Global Transpark. His fiscal policy advisor says Easley is very active behind the scenes in trying to recruit GTP tenants and supports continued funding of the Transpark.
It's an asset that we shouldn't quite give up hope on yet.
Many say too much has been spent on the GTP to give up. In the 14 years since the project was launched, federal, state, and county funding now exceeds $140 million. But the GTP has yet to lure a major corporate tenant or create a single manufacturing job.
There's really no positive net economic impact for the state. None.
While the GTP claims 10 tenants, 3 of them are state agencies that account for 42 of the 192 jobs at the Transpark.
I think it's an excellent point.
Transpark records show that its education and training center has been used mostly for meetings and tours, not for training workers for GTP jobs. GTP revenue can't keep up with its operating costs, and GTP officials say they can't pay back a $25 million loan the Transpark got from the state treasury in 1993. Some think the highway signs marking the Global Transpark development zone are a joke.
I get a tingly feeling that like it's really special, and when I leave I feel depressed that I'm not in the zone anymore.
And I just went down there asking them questions.
Bill Harper lives in the zone.
You know, where's my money? Where's my jobs? Give me something.
He's a Craven County commissioner and a longtime critic of the Transpark. He says the development zone is more of a spin zone.
55,000 high-tech jobs, 30-some miles from New Bern. I was tickled to death. But as time goes on, and time goes on, and time goes on, nothing came in. Nothing has come in, and it will never be a Global Transpark that they sold us.
The money is out of the taxpayers' hands, and they have it in theirs to play God with.
For more than a decade, Harper has organized protests of the Transpark.
Ask them today to give you a list of just one high-tech job that they furnish for our young kids. Just one.
It's a question the Spates asked too.
It hasn't been the hit they thought it would be.
Their protest of the Global Transpark is their own piece of global trans art sitting in their yard.
One image says more than all the words you could put down.
The Spates live right next to the GTP. The project has displaced many of their neighbors. Now they say the GTP Authority wants their property too.
We don't want to sell it.
We just want to be here.
We're not a big landowner, we're just a little one, but what we have means a lot to us. We hate to see it go.
The Spates would rather see the Transpark go.
Flush it.
The Spates say that's what's happened to the money spent on the GTP so far. Next, is it money down the drain or an investment that's finally about to pay off?
Has the Transpark been a good investment for North Carolina?
You're watching Focal Point from WRAL News. In-depth coverage you can count on.
Even those who support the Global Transpark can understand the criticism from those who don't. They admit the project hasn't lived up to expectations. They admit mistakes have been made. But they say it would be wrong to clip the wings of a project that is finally ready to fly. It was the dream that didn't come true.
How big a disappointment was that, losing Boeing?
Well, it was a huge disappointment. I think it would have made a huge difference in eastern North Carolina.
In 2003, Boeing considered the Global Transpark as the site for construction of its new Dreamliner, but Boeing's home state of Washington offered an incentive package worth more than triple North Carolina's. Labor unions also put pressure on Boeing to stay in Washington state.
I don't consider Boeing a rejection of this project. Boeing validated this project.
It helped put the GTP on the national map. GTP supporters say FedEx did the same a few years before when it considered the GTP, but ultimately chose Greensboro.
If we had had the interstate quality roads here, I believe FedEx would have rather been here.
But apparently FedEx and Boeing did see things they liked about the Transpark.
If it was completely without artificial resuscitation, dead on arrival, you would not have these major multinationals taking a look at the site.
Over the years, headlines have suggested a GTP in need of life support.
Big bucks for a project that was supposed to bring the world to a corner of North Carolina.
Even NBC News featured it in its Fleecing of America series.
I think anytime a project the size of this project gets negative publicity, it certainly doesn't help.
GTP officials say some of the negative publicity is warranted, but much of the criticism is not. They point out that while the project was launched in 1991, the environmental permit needed to start developing it was not granted until 7 years later.
Development started in 1998. You look at what we've done since then, and it's a lot.
Since 1998, the GTP has constructed its $3.7 million education and training center, a cargo facility, several hangars, and is currently constructing 2 more large buildings. It's also hired a commercial real estate firm to help market the space available.
With the scenario, if you build it, they will come, and you can't sell from an empty wagon.
Waddell says companies don't want to wait for construction of a building to locate at a site. She says there are already prospective tenants for GTP-1, a 120,000 square foot building that's nearing completion. The biggest development since 1998 has been the expansion of the runway to 11,500 feet. It's now the longest between Atlanta and Washington, D.C.
The runway was completed in 2002, which was right in the teeth of the recession, and firms were not expanding.
Boeing's consideration was a sign that times have changed. Now the GTP is working to lure Boeing's European counterpart, Airbus, which is looking to build a new manufacturing plant.
Obviously, if you land a big anchor tenant like that, life gets easier all the way around. That's why we wanted Boeing so badly.
Can you survive without it?
Yeah.
We may not have a home run as large as a Boeing, but we are going to have wins.
One step at a time by hitting singles rather than trying to swing for the fences.
Next, is the GTP's first manufacturing tenant a single or a stolen base?
We can't have somebody, screwing us around.
You're watching Focal Point from WRAL News. In-depth coverage you can count on.
We needed a place that was more conducive to the aviation business than Jones was.
Fogel says counties in the Global Transpark Development Zone are supposed to work together to attract new industry.
One for all and all for one.
But is it?
No. That's a bunch of BS, in my opinion.
I've said several times that one of the things that happens in eastern North Carolina is they circle the wagons and shoot inside.
If eastern counties were shooting for Workhorse, they were fighting for a company whose only 2 employees are the retired military couple who own it. They live in a boat in New Bern. Nevertheless, Workhorse says it has a Navy contract and is moving forward with plans to manufacture replacement parts for aging military aircraft at the GTP. It hopes to play a role in the Transpark's growth.
It may have taken a few years to take off, but I think it's taking off. And I'd like to be one of the catalysts.
In some ways, the Workhorse Aviation announcement is symbolic of the Global Transpark itself, a startup operation announced with some hype, built on uncertain predictions, tainted by controversy, but bolstered by hope. Its success could be the wind beneath the Transpark's wings. Its failure, another blow to the Transpark's progress. Workhorse is far from the home run GTP officials have wanted so badly, but they say it is a base hit. They say the same about the return of commercial passenger service to the Kinston Airport, which they say will help with industrial recruiting.
Are you the coach trying to build a program who doesn't have many wins right now? Is that the kind of heat you feel?
Well, that may be a reasonable analogy. Yeah.
The Global Transpark.
But even the coach has given up on the field of dreams and vision 14 years ago, before so much of our nation's manufacturing moved overseas.
I don't want to say there'll be thousands of jobs there next week or next year or even within 5 years. I think there'll be hundreds of jobs there in the next few years, but we're going to have to build this thing slowly and carefully and systematically.
In the world of economic development, there's a long time from seed to harvest. You saw that with the Research Triangle Park. You're seeing it with this project as well.
GTP officials say that the major taxpayer investment is over and even short of original cost estimates. And while the $142 million spent so far may sound like a lot of money, consider that the state's 2-year $31 billion budget is almost 220 times that amount.
So to invest $140 million over 14 years to try to create a park that ultimately might be like the Research Triangle Park and bring thousands of jobs and an opportunity for people, I think is a reasonable thing to do, and I think in time we're going to see it as a very good investment.
All in favor will vote aye.
The legislature has cut the GTP's annual appropriation from a high of $10 million in 1999 to only $1.6 million today. Half that is used to operate the Kinston Airport, which the GTP now owns.
For a region that is in desperate need of an economic stimulus, I think that's a wise investment on the part of the state.
GTP supporters say now that the state has so much invested in the Transpark, now that so many of the challenges have been overcome, now that it is finally ready for business, now is not the time to give up.
It took a long time, and then the economy changed, and there's just a whole lot of things happened, but we still have hope.
And so do many of the locals down at Connie's, even the critics.
It's a great idea, and there's no reason why it can't work.
I'm for the Global Transpark if we can get it working. It may not be in my lifetime, but I still think it's a good idea, and I'd like to see it. 2-mile runway will work.